In the picturesque hills of Vermont, United States, nestled among lush pine trees and crystal-clear lakes, resided a man named Henry. He was a well-known and respected figure in his hometown, an entrepreneur who had built an empire in the construction industry from scratch through hard work and dedication. Henry's company, a local source of pride, had erected numerous impressive structures, transforming the rural landscape into a thriving community. However, Henry was not just a successful businessman. He was also a man with a painful past, marked by the loss of his wife and a difficult relationship with his two sons, Peter and John. In the silence of his Victorian mansion, Henry lived the duality of being a successful widower, but emotionally tormented. Peter, the eldest son, was Henry's pride and joy. He saw in Peter an extension of himself, intelligent, ambitious, and with a natural talent for business. Since childhood, Peter had been by his father's side, absorbing his knowledge and skills, and therefore had been named as the apparent heir to the company. Peter was the reflection of a dream fulfilled, the continuation of a legacy. On the other hand, John, the younger son, lived in the shadow of his brother. He was a gentle-spirited boy with an inner passion for justice and a natural talent for problem-solving. Despite his abilities, John suffered from paternal rejection. Henry's preference for Peter was evident in all aspects, and this partiality created a rift between father and son. John, despite being as capable as Peter, was frequently left out, both in business and family moments. The reasons for this rejection, however, were rooted in a secret from the past that Henry carried with sorrow in his heart. Henry's wife had betrayed him years ago, and John was the product of that painful infidelity. This revelation, which occurred shortly before his wife's death, transformed the love that Henry felt for John into bitterness and resentment. Although John was innocent in this episode, he was a constant reminder of a betrayal that Henry could not forgive. Thus, in the peaceful landscape of Vermont, Henry's life unfolded between the highs and lows of being a successful entrepreneur and a father divided between love and rejection for his sons. His heart, although proud of his eldest son, still carried the pain of betrayal and guilt for rejecting his younger son. Peter, the favored son, stood out not only for his intelligence but also for an undeniable charisma that made him the center of attention. He had a captivating smile and a natural gift for persuading people around him, skills that helped him win his father's heart and the leadership of the family business. Peter was ambitious and determined, always seeking new opportunities and willing to face challenges, characteristics that Henry admired. However, although John was also talented and had great potential for business, he rarely received the recognition he deserved. John was creative, shrewd, and possessed a keen sense of justice, but these qualities were overshadowed by Henry's preference for Peter and the secret that haunted the family. The fact that John was the product of his late wife's infidelity deeply shook Henry's heart. The love he felt for his younger son turned into resentment and bitterness, and this toxic emotion corroded family ties. The tension between Henry and John had been building for some time. The air in the house had become heavy, and every exchange of glances between father and son fed the impending storm. Until one day, in the company office, the inevitable happened. "I've worked as hard as Peter." John confronted his father, brandishing a successful financial report he had prepared. "I deserve the same recognition as him." Henry, seated behind his mahogany desk, looked at John with a cold and weary gaze. "It's not about the work, John," he said, his voice low and controlled. "It's about trust. It's about family. I am your family." John retorted, frustration evident on his face. "I am your son, no matter what my mother did." The mention of his late wife's infidelity seemed to hit Henry like a punch. He stood up abruptly, his eyes burning with anger and pain. "You have no right to speak of her," he shouted, pointing to the door. "If you think you can disrespect me in my own house, in my own company, you're sorely mistaken." John, shocked by his father's outburst, fell silent. He looked at Henry, the man who once called him son, now a stranger before him. "I want you to leave," Henry said, his voice now a whisper but with unwavering determination, expelling his son from the house. John, already a young adult, was forced to face the world alone, carrying the stigma of being the unwanted son, the result of a betrayal for which he was not to blame. Meanwhile, Peter continued to shine in his father's eyes, oblivious to his brother's suffering and the storm on the horizon. Meanwhile, Peter, who had always shown himself to be charismatic and intelligent, began to reveal a dark and unscrupulous side. His unbridled ambition and lust for power led him to engage in illicit business and unethical practices, compromising the integrity of the family company. Through a network of shady contacts, Peter diverted funds from the company, manipulating accounts and financial records to cover his tracks. He forged contracts and bribed public officials, ensuring that the construction company benefited from illegal concessions and bids. Behind his charming smile was a man who spared no effort to maintain his position and wealth. However, justice was not slow to catch up with him. The authorities, alerted by anonymous tips and parallel investigations, began to close in on the company and its corrupt practices. Peter, feeling the pressure mounting, knew it was only a matter of time before his actions came to light. Desperate to protect himself and his reputation, Peter devised a diabolical plan. He would incriminate his own father for the crimes he had committed. With skill and cunning, he manipulated documents and evidence, planting incriminating proof that pointed to Henry as the mastermind behind the illicit acts. So, when authorities knocked on the company's door, they found a trail of corruption that pointed directly to the family patriarch. Unaware of his son's machinations, Henry was caught off guard, not realizing he was about to become the scapegoat for his favorite son's crimes. As events unfolded, Henry, the prosperous entrepreneur who once reigned supreme in Vermont, was arrested and convicted of corruption. The judge's gavel sounded like a prelude to a life he never imagined living. He was taken into custody, his image of success and respectability shattered in the blink of an eye. Henry's world changed dramatically. The walls of his prison cell became his new home, replacing the Victorian mansion where he once lived. His prisoner uniform replaced the well-tailored suits he used to wear. His once flourishing and prosperous business empire crumbled, leaving only memories and regrets behind. Loneliness seeped into his soul like a cold mist. Days and nights blended into endless monotony. His thoughts often wandered to the son he had expelled, the son who, of all people, had shown him compassion and unconditional love. However, amidst the pain and isolation, there was a single source of light in Henry's life, John. Abandoned by many who once called him a friend and avoided by Peter, who hid behind a veil of denials, it was John who stood firm by his father's side. One day, sitting in his cell, Henry heard the sound of footsteps approaching and the echo of keys jingling. The guard announced the arrival of a visitor. Henry's heart raced as he was led to the visiting room and saw John's familiar face on the other side of the glass. "John," Henry murmured, his voice trembling with emotion. "Hi, Dad," John replied with a sad smile, his eyes shining with determination and compassion. Henry swallowed hard, feeling a wave of gratitude and regret. "I didn't expect to see you here, son. I'm sorry for everything." John nodded, but showed no resentment. "Dad, I came because I believe in you. I know you didn't do what they're saying. I'll fight to prove your innocence." With tears in his eyes, Henry looked at the son he had rejected for so long. "Thank you, John," he said, his voice choked with emotion. And so, the rejected son became the only support for his father in the storm of hopelessness that his life had become. United by adversity and the desire for justice, father and son would walk together in search of truth and redemption. Despite facing his father's rejection for so many years, John never gave up on him. John's love and loyalty propelled him forward, even in the midst of pain and sadness. He enrolled in law school and dedicated himself body and soul to his studies, determined to make a difference in the world and fight for justice. After years of study and dedication, John graduated with honors and quickly gained a reputation as a brilliant and insightful lawyer. With his heart focused on his goal, he worked tirelessly to reopen his father's case, hoping to uncover the truth and free Henry from the unjust conviction. John invested years of his life in this pursuit, scouring every detail of the case, analyzing documents, and interviewing witnesses. He traveled a long road, following leads that would lead him to the truth behind the web of lies and corruption. With meticulousness and patience, John managed to gather enough evidence to prove his father's innocence and expose Peter's guilt. John's determination and passion for justice were instrumental in uncovering the case. He showed the world the truth about Peter's nefarious scheme and the injustice that had been committed against Henry. With each new discovery and puzzle piece fit, John was getting closer and closer to absolving his father and repairing his broken family ties. In court, the air was charged with expectation and tension. All eyes were on John as he prepared to present his findings. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "Your Honor, jurors, I want to present new evidence that will change the course of this case," he said, his confident voice resonating through the courtroom. John meticulously unraveled the evidence he had collected. With each document, each testimony, and each piece of evidence, he painted a convincing picture of innocence for Henry and guilt for Peter. "This evidence shows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that my father, Henry, is innocent of the charges against him," John stated, his eyes shining with determination. "And unfortunately, it reveals that the true culprit is my brother, Peter." A silence fell over the courtroom, interrupted only by the rustling of papers and the shocked murmurs of the crowd. The entire town seemed to be in shock. The favorite son, Peter, the charismatic prodigy, was the true culprit. Peter was arrested, his mask of innocence finally shattered. The courtroom was in an uproar, but in the midst of the chaos, a man stood up, free from his handcuffs and the shadow of guilt that had haunted him for so long. Henry was finally released. As Henry hugged John, grateful and emotional, the entire town witnessed the redemption of the man they had wrongly judged and the courage of the rejected son who fought for truth and justice. As soon as Henry and John finished their embrace, the father looked up to find his oldest son, Peter, being led away by guards. The room was still buzzing with the shocking revelation, and the air was heavy with shock and betrayal. Henry walked slowly towards Peter, each step reflecting the pain of a father betrayed by his own son. With his eyes fixed on Peter, Henry spoke, his voice firm despite the lump in his throat. "Peter, how could you? How could you let me take the blame for your crimes?" Peter, in his arrogance, stared at his father with a cold and disdainful look. "I did what I had to do, old man," he spat the words out with contempt. "You were always weak, always doing everything by the book. We could have been much more prosperous, but you always interfered. I just wanted what was rightfully mine." The room fell into a shocking silence, Peter's confession echoing off the walls. Henry shook his head, a mix of sadness and disbelief in his eyes. "You had it all, Peter. And now, you've lost everything because of greed and selfishness." With those words, Henry walked away, leaving Peter to face the consequences of his actions. The court watched in silence as the favorite son was taken away, leaving behind a hurt but finally free father and a rejected brother who had proven to be the true hero of the story. After the storm of events, the bond between Henry and John began to transform, growing and strengthening in ways they had never imagined. Henry, now seeing John through a new lens, perceived his son in a completely different way. He saw, with clarity, the unshakable strength that John had shown, even when the world seemed to be against him. He saw the unquestionable loyalty of a son who, despite being rejected, never abandoned his father. He saw the tireless courage that John had demonstrated in facing injustice and fighting for truth, even when the odds were against him. These qualities, previously obscured by Henry's prejudices and resentments, now shone brighter than ever. And with this new understanding came a new love and respect for John, a love that had been lost but now blossomed stronger than ever. Together, father and son set out to rebuild. To rebuild the company that had been tainted by greed and corruption. To rebuild their relationship, which had been shattered by rejection and betrayal. And every day, with every step they took together, they proved that even in the most adverse circumstances, love and truth could prevail. Henry's legacy, once threatened by the shadow of corruption, now flourished in the capable hands of John. The company prospered, and the relationship between father and son grew stronger, marking a new chapter for the family and the town that had witnessed their tumultuous journey. And so, my dear viewers, we conclude the story of Henry and John, a journey of betrayal, rejection, and redemption. A story that teaches us that the truth always finds a way to come to light, and that even in the darkest moments, the light of love and loyalty can shine. This story shows us that no matter how complex the circumstances may be, there is always an opportunity for growth, forgiveness, and change. Henry and John showed us how facing adversity and overcoming obstacles can eventually lead to a deeper understanding and a stronger love. We hope you enjoyed this story as much as we did. And may it serve as a reminder that no matter how difficult life may seem, there is always hope and always a way to do the right thing. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and share it with your friends. And of course, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Until then, remember, even in the darkest storms, there is always a beacon of light. See you next time, folks.